Chapter 27, Persistence. Good. Applause thundered. The atmosphere beneath the champ position was entirely different. Everyone was shouting loudly, completely infatuated with the two beautiful figures on stage. The amber radiance of the Hu amber silk and the endless blue brilliance of the Tianyao divine sword turned this place into a fairyland. Exceptionally beautiful, but even more beautiful were the two young women flying back and forth. This contest had been going on since morning until now. An hour had passed, and yet neither side had gained the upper hand, especially Tialinger from the Great Bamboo Peak. Under the Tianyao divine sword of Lu Zueki, she managed to hold her ground, both attacking and defending for so long without showing any signs of defeat, which was quite astonishing. In the audience, the seniors and masters of the two sects such as Tia Bai, Su Ryu, and Master Shuyu were all watching the exciting contest from below the stage. Even the head Dao Zhuan true person was sitting in a chair, watching the thrilling contest, with a smile on his lips, nodding frequently, showing great satisfaction. Tia Bai and Su Ryu, deeply connected by affection, were naturally nervous, but seeing Tialinger as agile Dao techniques holding up against Lu Zueki's Tianyao divine sword, they relaxed a bit. Tia Bai glanced at his wife beside him. Seeing her tense expression, he whispered softly, "Relax, Linger will be fine." So Ryu turned her head for some reason. He still persisted in moving forward. Tia Bai watched as his youngest disciple slowly approached. Without saying a word, his stout figure left his seat and stood up. So Ryu felt something, looked at her husband strangely, then noticed something was wrong, followed his gaze, and suddenly turned pale, immediately standing up as well. At this moment, more people turned their attention to them. Zhang Xiaofan walked in front of Tia Bai, who watched his usually neglected disciple, observing his inexplicable stubbornness. Suddenly, a surge of uncontrollable anger rose in his heart, so strong that even though he tried to suppress it, everyone still heard his anger. "Xiaofan, who dared to hurt you like this? Haven't they had enough even after winning?" So Ryu trembled, hearing her husband show genuine anger for this disciple who was usually looked down upon. She felt somewhat worried, pulling Tia Bai softly, but then she noticed something was wrong. Following his gaze, her face turned pale, and she immediately stood up. At this moment, more people looked over. As Zhang Xiaofan walked past Tia Bai, he looked at his master's angry expression on his usually plump face, as if there was still a trace of care. He shook his head weakly and whispered, "No, master, I won." After saying that, he suddenly felt dizzy. Everything went dark in an instant, and he collapsed to the ground, unconscious. Zhang Xiaofan fell to the ground, unconscious, but what he said before passing out stunned everyone on the Great Bamboo Peak. After a moment, Tia Bai and others reacted, helping Zhang Xiaofan up. Tia Bai carefully examined him and found that although Zhang Xiaofan's body was covered in burns as if scorched by a fire, his internal organs were mostly unharmed. He had probably fainted due to exhaustion, and no one knew what had happened during the contest just now. He pondered for a moment, and with the corner of his eye, he saw more and more people looking over here. He didn't want to be watched by everyone here, so he picked up Zhang Xiaofan and whispered to Su Ryu, "I'll take Xiaofan back. You watch Linger here." Su Ryu frowned, but still nodded. Looking at Zhang Xiaofan, who was lying unconscious, her anxious expression couldn't be concealed. The disciples of the Great Bamboo Peak around also gathered. "To be," she said. "Master, I'll go with you." Tia Bai shook his head. "No need." At this moment, even Dao Zhuan true person's attention was drawn over, asking, "Brother Tia, is this your disciple?" "What happened?" Tia Bai replied lightly. "He's not feeling well due to a slight injury from his practice. I'll take him to rest. Excuse us." Dao Zhuan true person nodded, turned away, and looked back at the thrilling contest on stage. As Tia Bai carried Zhang Xiaofan out of the crowd, the incident quickly subsided, and people became excited again for the two beautiful women on stage. Only a few young disciples standing on the outskirts of the crowd noticed that most of the disciples from the wine returning peak had turned pale, and in groups of 3 or 5, They were gathering in the distance. If Zhang Xiaofan were here, he would surely have noticed that it was the place where the contests between the returning Wine Peak and the Great Bamboo Peak had taken place. Below the 9 hells, in the halls of the Yan Luo Palace, everywhere was burning with raging fires, roasting the crying and screaming people. The smell of blood and burnt flesh nauseating. Zhang Xiaofan felt his head spinning, but in just a moment, he suddenly returned to many years ago, to a peaceful small mountain village, where the breeze was gentle and soothing. But a thunderous roar echoed through the sky. The sky was covered in dark clouds like mountains, like a raging sea. In an instant, the kind and friendly villagers turned into mountains of corpses, and the peaceful village became hell on earth. Now, he shouted with all his might. His whole body tensed up. A piercing pain came from his chest, making him gasp for breath. Trembling all over, waking up. He's awake. Xiaofan is awake. That voice, almost engraved deep in his heart, rang out first, carrying a mix of worrying and joy. Zhang Xiaofan opened his eyes and saw Tianyin. It felt like he had returned to the past. She was in red, her waist still wrapped with a hu amber silk, her silky hair draped over her fair neck, her bright eyes, pure pupils. Zhang Xiaofan even saw his own reflection in them. Senior sister, he called out in his heart. Zhang Xiaofan looked at her, without even blinking. If this moment could become eternity, how wonderful it would be. In the room, the people from the Great Bamboo Peak surrounded him. Tia Bai came forward to check his pulse, nodded, and said, "He's fine now." Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, each showing a relieved smile. Zhang Xiaofan looked around and saw everyone from the Great Bamboo Peak here, himself lying on the bed in the room, and his senior brothers standing on the ground. Tia Bai and Su are you sitting on chairs by the bed? What happened? Zhang Xiaofan asked. Tianyin smiled. Did you forget so soon? You had a contest with Peng Chang from the Wine Returning Peak during the day, and when you came back, you fainted, which scared everyone, but luckily, it's nothing serious. Zhang Xiaofan moved his body and indeed, aside from feeling tired, only his chest hurt a bit. He couldn't help but be surprised. How did this happen? I clearly ... Tia Bai interrupted. Those burns are just superficial injuries. Use the special medicine of our Qingyun Sect to apply it, and you'll be fine. Right now, you just suffered a heavy blow to the chest, but your bones and meridians are undisturbed. Rest for a few days, and you'll be fine.